It usually doesn't start with something obvious. No big argument, no clear signal, just a small shift. The reply takes a little longer, the tone feels slightly colder. The attention that once felt effortless becomes unpredictable. And suddenly, without anyone saying it out loud, you're thinking more than you should. Not about what was said, but about what it meant. That's where psychology begins. And sometimes, that's where dark psychology quietly enters the room. Because the uncomfortable truth is this: human behavior, especially in relationships, is not always direct, rational, or even fully conscious. It runs on patterns, feedback loops, incentives. And if you look closely, many of these patterns follow the same logic you see in systems like markets or negotiations. Not because people are calculating machines, but because attention, emotion, and uncertainty behave like currencies, and currencies can be managed. So if we want to understand the psychology of girls, not stereotypes, not cliches, but actual behavioral patterns, we need to stop thinking in terms of what she said and start thinking in terms of what system is being created. Because once a system forms, outcomes become predictable. Let's start with something simple: indirect communication. On the surface, it looks inefficient. Why not just say exactly what you mean? But in practice, indirect signals create something valuable: information asymmetry. One person knows how they feel, the other has to interpret. That gap does something interesting. It forces effort. You start analyzing tone, timing, word choice. In economic terms, you're investing cognitive energy to reduce uncertainty. And the more you invest, the more you care about the outcome, which means the system is already working. Now here's where it becomes uncomfortable. Because this isn't always intentional, but it is functional. Indirect communication filters people. Those who understand stay engaged. Those who don't fade out. It's not a statement, it's a sorting mechanism. Then comes emotional influence. Emotions are often treated like noise, irrational, unpredictable. But in reality, they behave more like signals. A shift in mood, a moment of distance, a sudden warmth. Each one changes the environment you're operating in. And humans are highly responsive to emotional environments. You adjust your behavior, your tone, your level of effort. Without realizing it, you're optimizing for a response. This is where dark psychology gets its reputation, not because emotions are fake, but because they can guide outcomes without explicit instruction. No one tells you what to do, but you do it anyway. Then there's the pattern everyone recognizes but rarely understands: hot and cold behavior. Attention, then absence, closeness, then distance. It feels chaotic, but it's not. It creates volatility, and volatility keeps attention locked in. Think about it. Stable systems are easy to ignore. You understand them, predict them, move on. Unstable systems demand focus. You check your phone more, you replay conversations, you try to find patterns, because the brain is designed to resolve uncertainty, and when it can't, it keeps trying. That's not romance, that's a loop. Now layer in something even more subtle: testing behavior. No formal questions, no direct challenges, just small situations: a delayed reply, a vague statement, a shift in energy. And then observation, not of what you say, but how you react. Do you get anxious, defensive, indifferent? Each reaction reveals something: confidence, insecurity, neediness. From a systems perspective, this is data collection. Low cost, high value. Because reactions are harder to fake than words. Again, this doesn't require conscious strategy. It emerges naturally from social interaction, but the effect is the same. Information is gathered, decisions are adjusted. Then there's attention, probably the most underestimated variable in all of this. Attention feels like something we give freely, but it's not free. It's limited, scarce, competitive. And when something becomes scarce, its perceived value increases. So when attention is consistent, it feels normal. When it becomes inconsistent, it feels important. Not because the person changed, but because the supply did. This is basic scarcity logic, and it works whether anyone intends it to or not. Pull attention back, even slightly, and the system reacts. Effort increases, focus sharpens, because now there's something to regain, and humans are wired to chase what feels just out of reach. Now zoom out. All of these patterns, indirect communication, emotional signaling, mixed attention, behavioral testing, they don't operate in isolation. They interact, they reinforce each other, and over time, they create a system where one thing becomes very clear. The person who controls uncertainty controls the dynamic. Not completely, not absolutely, but enough to influence outcomes. And that's where the gap between perception and reality starts to widen. Because on the surface, everything looks emotional, spontaneous, natural. But underneath, there's structure. There's cause and effect. There are feedback loops. And once you see those loops, it becomes harder to ignore them. Which brings us to the part most people don't want to think about, because it challenges a very comfortable idea that behavior is always honest, transparent, and easy to interpret. It's not. Not because people are deceptive, but because human interaction evolved to be efficient, not necessarily clear. Signals replaced statements, reactions replaced explanations, and systems formed. So when people talk about dark psychology of girls, they often imagine something deliberate, strategic, almost manipulative. But the reality is more subtle. These patterns exist because they work. They hold attention, they reveal information, they create emotional impact. And anything that consistently produces results tends to stick. Now compare that to the way this topic is usually presented. Oversimplified, overgeneralized, turned into lists and tricks, as if understanding psychology gives you control over people. It doesn't. At best, it gives you awareness of the system you're already inside. And that awareness comes with a trade-off, because once you see the patterns, you also see the uncertainty. You realize that not every signal is intentional, not every reaction is meaningful, not every dynamic is stable, which means you can't fully predict outcomes. You can only recognize structures, and maybe respond differently. So the real question isn't whether these patterns exist. They do. The question is what you do once you notice them, because understanding the system doesn't remove you from it. It just changes how you see it. And sometimes seeing clearly is more uncomfortable than being confused, because confusion leaves room for hope. Clarity doesn't. So the next time something feels slightly off, a delayed response, a shift in tone, a moment of distance, you might want to ask a different question. Not what does this mean, but what kind of system is this creating? Because that answer tends to be more honest.